Yes.
It's a long-term project to get this room sorted out. But yeah.
Alan Morrison was just talking about the hoops to his right shoulder, and he was trying to convince Brian and us that he's not broken and not another penny campaign, but we'll come back to that. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Friday afternoon. This is Brian Degnan. This is Celtic by Numbers, the Huddle Breakdown. Alan Morrison. We want to hear all about our new signings. Hopefully Alan can enlighten us. And I'm going to come to you first, Brian. We're starting to get the wheels in motion. How does it feel?
Yeah, it's been refreshing at least, and I try to be as positive about things as possible, and it's got to say that so far, at least with Hu and Duran, it looks like we've signed some very decent players. I think Hassan, I remember him from in particular the game against Argentina in the World Cup, and he was absolutely electric. So he's an exciting prospect. The German lad Mika Bohr, is that how you pronounce it? Bohr.
Are you a 24 fan?
I'm not sure.
I think it's Jack Bauer, wasn't it? That's how you pronounced him, wasn't
it? And I'm not sure. I'm not sure much about that guy, to be fair. But I can't be too critical of the signs that have been brought in. If you can be critical about maybe the manner in which it's happened and the time it's taken, and there's still a few, certainly a few adjustments needed. There's certainly some other positions that I'm a wee bit concerned about. But yeah, I've got to say, Hu looks a real player. Very excited about Hassan and Duran as well. So pretty positive, to be fair.
No, that's good. And positivity is key. Of course it is. I am going to run with the tagline because it is my utter belief that the whole thing that Celtic fans have been asking for, demanding almost. There's a monkey to your left as well. I don't know what you get up to in that room, Alan, but there's a monkey's head to your left. Just notice that.
To know, Paul.
That is for you to know. We don't want to find out. We don't want to find out. But I've been talking all week, Alan, about the fact that what Celtic fans are asking for, stroke demanding almost, is pretty basic in the world of football. Is to have a strategy in place whereby you strengthen every window. It's to have a strategy in place whereby if one of your players who signed 2 or 3 seasons ago comes to the end of their cycle and there's a big money bid, you move them on. And because you've got a recruitment policy and strategy in place, you've got a replacement lined up. That is not rocket science. We're not asking for the world here, Alan.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, Celtic, it's not like Celtic haven't spent money over the years. They have, and have bought lots of players. I think one thing is two trends, I would say. One is the recruitment seems to be almost oblivious to the realities of the calendar in terms of when we've got important matches. But again, to balance that, Scottish football season starts a lot earlier than most leagues around Europe. And so, sometimes you cannot get deals done because, I mean, the English league starts three weeks after the Scottish league. So if people are not willing to do deals because they're sorting their squads out, they're not even back early days of pre-season training, etc. Whereas you're waiting to play your first game, that does have an impact. So I think that's only fair to point that out. And then the second thing is just the length of time it takes Celtic to do deals. That's the other kind of common theme, really. And I don't know whether that's a bandwidth issue or a competence issue. Either way, you could argue it's a competence issue in terms of just the sheer amount of time that it does take. But listen, we seem to this summer have adopted a strategy of going for quality in terms of and you're buying good quality players. It can take a long time. It's very easy to get players in who nobody else wants. It can happen very quickly. Getting players who other teams want and clubs who are selling them don't want to sell, that takes a lot more time. And then you do have the issue of, while Celtic in itself would be an attractive proposition for most footballers given the size of the club and the exposure it gets mainly in Europe and the prospect of winning trophies, and some players do care about that. In general, it isn't an attractive environment to attract players into. So you're always up against it in that regard. So, but listen, this summer we seem to be making progress on what look like sort of coherent, sensible, decent quality players, which is good.
Quality, big word, massive word in respect of what Brendan Rodgers was demanding, Brian. Martin O'Neill came in, he's been demanding it. And for many, many years, I think sometimes we have a simplistic view of how transfers work, where I've always said, instead of trying to scratch about and buy 3 players at £3 million, why not go out and buy the one guy that can do the job? And although that takes you into a different bracket with the transfer fee and the wages, then I think it is increasing your possibility of signing a better standard of player. It doesn't always work like that. There is no exact science, otherwise every club would follow the same path. And of course, we have managed to break the mold by bringing in really inexpensive guys. Most recently, Benjamin Negrin, for example, 1.7 million, an incredible bit of work, we've got to say, and that's credit where credit's due. I've never really felt that we've had an issue in identifying talent. There's no real excuse to have an issue in not identifying talent. All the tools that are available to football clubs, Brian, right, in relation to data, scouting, etc., to recruit players. And again, I think my simplistic view is we just don't get the deals done. I think actually if you peel the layers back a little bit, and I do speak to as many people as I can, because I don't believe that if you're getting fed little tidbits from the club that you can claim to be in the know. You're just basically a stooge. I mean, actually getting information involves you building relationships with people who do work in the game, be that through their own agencies, other people's agencies, people who have been employed by the football club, who may wish to speak to you in relation to their own frustrations when they were there at an executive level or a managerial level. And then, of course, the whistleblower, who is as frustrated as we are as Celtic supporters. They do speak, and they do speak to us at ACSOM. So we build a view based on that, Brian. And the way that I'm looking at this is that, see, when Celtic allow the Blazerati, those with all the financial intelligence to make football decisions, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But see, when they let the football people with the football intelligence make that decision, it does work. Yes, the deal still has to be done. But let's not have those people identifying players. That has happened in the past. See, if you let your manager run a transfer window with that quality, with a focus on quality, what you get is Brendan Rodgers signing Schmeichel, Engels, Ida and Trusty in one window. When you let a manager with the football intelligence run a transfer window, what you get is what we're seeing now. If you let the Blazers, those with all the financial intelligence in the world, run transfer windows the way they want to run them, that's when you see January happening. That's when you see these windows happening where we are lowballing clubs and we're just trying to bring in players that have a lot of the time just been offered to us by agents. There's a player today that is now apparently being pursued by Rangers. I heard 2 months ago he was offered to Celtic. These agents come to Scotland and offered them to Celtic and Rangers. That's always been the case. So I think what we're seeing here is the football department, those with that specialism, Brian, are absolutely running this window now. Now, I'll come back to when I think the tipping point was in a second, but do you think that is the way that Celtic have been working in the past? Too many people who don't have the football intelligence, and we know who we're talking about, past CEOs, who are absolutely influential when it comes to recruiting players.
I suspect that's been the case, yeah. I mean, you'll never know 100%, but it certainly felt that way in previous times. And then obviously you did the Tisdale debacle of the past year or so, which certainly didn't help. And look, playing devil's advocate, if there has been a tipping point, if they have finally learned to let the football people deal with football and decisions, which is a very basic common sense approach.
What a concept that is, Brian. I know, imagine letting the football guys do that.
They might even speak to their fans and communicate a bit better soon as well, but we'll see how that one pans out. But the reality is, look, if it's for the benefit of the club, and if it's finally after a lot of time getting done well, then brilliant. I think that's all everyone's been asking for. The one note of caution I'd put on some of the sort of the figures. So I know 11 million is a lot of money for Celtic to pay, but when we signed, was it Sutton for 6 million? Hartson for 6 million back in the day.
Yeah.
So 6 million now is about 11.7 million inflationary.
According to Chris Sutton, it's 100 million. He reckons it was worth 100 million. Yeah.
Right, but you're still roughly paying out about the same amount. So, well, yes, it's getting a bit more up to date. That's kind of what we should be playing for the market we need to shop in. So, and of course, we've still made money coming in. So, yes, we're saying good quality players, certainly by the looks of it, but I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where we break the bank. And actually, we shouldn't have to. I've often spoken about just having a strategy, but it's not about how much money you spend, it's how well you spend it. And I think if we spend it properly on the quality players, I've no issue with what amount goes out or what amount comes in. I'm sort of, I don't, suddenly paying X amount of million for a player doesn't really impress me as long as they're the right player. And I think you can get a bit callous with money sometimes. But as I say, I think you have to give credit if they have learned the lessons and they are improving, and we'll see this over the fullness of time, not just the past couple of weeks, then you have to say fair play.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that strategy involves, guys, is that we get to a point with Arnie Engels being the most recent one, the current one, Alan, where that player who you've invested in, you put him on the platform, you've done all these things, these selling points that you touched on when we opened the show, Alan. This is Celtic, there's the fans, there's the Champions League, go and do your thing. He's done it. And he's now in a position where there's interest from various clubs. He has got his absolute mind fixed on going to London. So the London club that comes in is West Ham. It's in the Championship. We can argue the toss as to whether that's the best move for the player, but he wants to go to London. And if that deal is wrapped up and he leaves for, different fees have been reported, 22 to 25 I've also seen 26 to 30. These things, you never know for sure exactly how much they are. But in terms of that player leaving the football club, Alan, do you think he progressed as much as he could with Celtic? And do you think the time is right to move the player on in terms of the player's development?
Well, funnily enough, the biggest leap forward that I think we saw with Engels was last week. Kilmarnock. I don't think we've ever seen him play like that before. He was incredible. He was doing everything, which is kind of what I hoped he would always be like. So whether that was a case of him getting excited to position himself for that move, which is a very cynical position to take, but nevertheless, that the timing was a bit odd. No, I don't think he did particularly. The irony of this is, under Martin O'Neill, he actually only now has got the chance to play in a role that is going to maximise his strengths, playing probably a little bit deeper with Callum McGregor, being given license to play more direct, more vertical football, which is his strength, less sort of intricate passing on the edge of the box, which is not his strength. So trying to shoehorn a player like that into a Postecoglou Rodgers type side was never, to me, a good use of his considerable talents. I mean, the guy's a good footballer, but he's good in a way, not in a way that Celtic have traditionally played, and sort of shoehorning him in meant that he certainly added value in the sense that he was an energetic, purposeful, disciplined, well-organised footballer in the midfield. So he helped to keep the team shape. He was box to box. He gave you that grass coverage. He gave you all those sort of off the ball things as well. But on the ball, it didn't really help the team in terms of breaking down low blocks or progressing the balls through the lines, etc. Especially as we've seen in the last couple of years, the emergence of teams with a much higher press and a lot more man-to-man marking. He didn't really sort of help us in that regard. So I think to get a lot of money for him is good. It's good for him. I think he'll do well. I think West Ham will probably come straight back up very easily, and he'll be in the Premier League next season. So I think it's a win all round, frankly. And I think Celtic should be focusing on getting a replacement who's better suited to Celtic's style of play.
Yeah, that just leads us on to that next bit. I mean, obviously, we gravitate towards certain players. We love them when they're here, etc., Brian. But the brutal reality of football, modern football, is you're gone as soon as that door shuts. We need a replacement in. That we're part of that. That you are a commodity when you're a football player. And once that jersey, that registration's been sold to West Ham, you need to bring another one in. And as Alan says, I would say I've been a champion. Some people might even describe me as a fanboy of Arnie Engels. We all have that in us, Brian. I mean, you love Dane Murray. You are a massive Dane Murray fan. You were the founding member of the Dane Murray CSC. I think you were also involved back in the day with Amy Canavan in setting up the Greg Taylor CSC. I mean, or was it an appreciation society? I don't know. I've always liked Arnie Engels, and I've read with interest the flack that he gets as well, because I can understand where that comes from. I mean, I see an anonymity at times when he's playing, where you watch an entire game, you think, what's Engels done? Maybe after the event, if you were doing video analysis, you would see exactly what he's done and what he's covered, and the fires that he's been putting out, and a lot of that kind of stuff goes under the radar, Brian. But I think what we are losing is a very effective, influential player, and we don't have anyone at the moment in the midfield with the legs of an Arnie Engels. I'm going to come back to profiling players with Alan in a second when we talk about Bauer, but I simply don't think they're the same type of player. And I do think that there's been a few names mentioned. The ones I spoke about yesterday were Nico Sigur, Miguel Chaiwa, who I've never been convinced with, incidentally, and Gavidas Janitas. There are names being discussed at this moment in time. One of them might be an Arnie Engels replacement. But I think what we need to do is we need to act fast on this, Brian, because he will be a big loss.
So, yeah, I actually agree. I'd liked Engels. I was a bit of an Engels defender at times. I felt at first he was a bit sort of, the expectation was so high because of the price tag. But I think, especially last season, I think we're a much better team with him in it. And you know, and listen, Alan's much more astute than I, but I've spoken before about the need for that sort of athleticism and pace in midfield, especially in Europe, because we simply don't have it. We're very easily overrun. And I think physicality and athleticism is a good equaliser for technically better players that you're up against. So I think we'll miss him in that respect. And I did allude to it at the start of the show. The midfield's an area of concern for me, despite the positivity around the transfers, because I think, as well as we don't have that natural ball-winning midfielder that I think we've been looking for a long time, we also don't have that deep-line playmaker. If Callum McGregor gets injured, then I think we really struggle in that position. And even with, if you look at the midfield, if you go, say, a midfield three at the moment, and it's McGregor, Bauer, Negrin, physically that's not an imposing trio, no matter how technically good they might be. There's also, I don't know about Bauer, but there's not a lot of legs there either. Bernardo's gone, Engels is likely to go, and then you've got McCowan and Oxlade-Chamberlain in the background. Again, physically not very imposing, so I'm slightly concerned about the centre-mid positions. Chaiwa, I think, is decent for Hibs. I'd rather have Mulligan in. I think Mulligan could develop into a better player. Again, I think he's got more physicality. Javitas, I thought, was an attacking mid, but if he's a holding midfielder, good. I know he's quite a big guy, but we need at least one of those players in. I would like two in that position, but I think that's an area we really need to focus on, because you can have really good up front and you can be pretty strong. And I think we're pretty okay defensively, to be honest, depending on what happens with AJ. But middle of the park, I think we can go overrun pretty easily in Europe.
Yeah, and again, a lot of people have mentioned the fact that we kept Oxlade-Chamberlain on for another season, and I've asked the question, Alan, what is it that Oxlade-Chamberlain brings to the Celtic midfield? I mean, he's a guy who's got an incredible history, brilliant CV, but he's at the tail end of his career. This might be the last club he plays for. And from what I've seen last season, yeah, he's got technical ability. I just never thought he was 100% match sharp. I didn't see him orchestrating the pace of a game. I never seen any of that. So Oxlade-Chamberlain, I mean, has he been retained in terms of a squad player, a jersey filler almost? And do you expect us to spend big? If we get whatever the fee is, 22 to 25, 25 to 28, whatever the fee may be, are we spending big on his replacement, or are we going out there and we're buying a goalkeeper, a left back, a centre mid, a left winger? Are we using, I think we're maybe up around 18 to 20 million pound at the moment. Are we using that bounty to completely refashion the whole side in the squad?
Well, there's certainly gaps in the squad that need to be filled. Midfield, as Brian, pointed out, is still an area of concern. Even, taking Engels out of it and not replacing him doesn't help in any shape or form. I can only go on what the chatter is around names that are linked. And it does seem to be slightly more defensive, let's call it, midfielders, although there was interest potentially in the Bosnian lad. Was it Bosnian? And Mehmet, sorry, apologies if I butchered that, who's a more of an attacking player. But I mean, if you take the view that, if you want to sort of think that the kind of behind the striker, second striker, stroke 10 position is kind of covered by Negrin and Duran, then you probably are looking for more sort of central midfielders with a bit more of a rounded profile, I suppose is the way I'd put it. But yeah, I mean, clearly we're trying to get in another left back to back up Kieran Tierney, and clearly we're trying to get a goalkeeper to play and give competition to Sinisalo. And I hope on that one that it is somebody who's going to compete, as opposed to bringing in another Joe Hart type figure, i.e. an older, more experienced keeper who's immediately going to be number one. I think Sinisalo deserves to fight for that. Deserves a fair fight for that jersey. So another similarly profiled goalkeeper, I think, would be good. So yeah, so I think there's plenty of work to do, and so I think we will do business. It has been decent so far, and sensible, and in areas that we need it. But it is incredibly slow. It continues to be incredibly slow.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the timeline on that, Alan, because it does feel as though it's picked up. I want to look at the timeline to see if there was anything that sparked that movement. And of course, what happens when the players start to come in, particularly this time of the year, there's a momentum. And even the social media team, Brian, feel as though they're emboldened and galvanised by this so that they can basically be widos online. It's great. It's fantastic. And they start to wind up the other side and all that kind of stuff. And it flows into the fans and the mood of the supporters. And I can see it even in the comments today. I've got comments coming in saying, what a time to be a Celtic fan. And you look at that and you think to yourself, absolutely, this is what it's all about. It doesn't change the interest in the football club. In fact, it becomes apathetic when you don't feel that link between the fan base and what the club are actually doing. And I think that was seen in the 2 pre-season friendlies where there weren't many fans turning up to them, because it was almost as if, well, you know what, we've already bought we've done our bit here. You need to do your bit. And hopefully that's what we're doing. We hear all the time suggestions of songs. We've heard a lot in relation to our new striker. Do we have any song suggestions for Mika Bauer? Let us know in the comments section. As I've already said, tip of the hat to the social media guy or girl who has been putting quite a lot of really decent videos and announcement videos out there. I'm going to bring in some of these comments, and I'm going to start off with Dennis Jameson, who reckons a goalkeeper, left back, defensive mid. I would throw in a left winger, if I'm being greedy, into that mix as well. And we've also got James Docherty coming in. Engels gone for 22. Absolute joke. We are forced to pay top drawer money and give him away on the cheap, even at 22. And I think there's add-ons. I do think there's add-ons that will take him up to 25, 26, James. We've doubled our money on a player who I think probably still divides opinion. So good bit of business by the football club. Although, yes, when you look at the fact there was a £25 million bid in January, we were right to keep him, Brian. We were right not to take the 25. Quinny says it on a Monday, transfer fees are abstract. Was he worth 25 million in January? Is he worth 22 million now? I would much rather look at it and say, is the timing right? Because it wasn't in January.
No, and we've had that before with players as well, where we've maybe kept them too long and not capitalised. So it can work both ways. But listen, I mean, look, if you make £11 million profit on an investment in any business, that's good business, especially football. And yeah, we paid £11 million for him, but you doubled that back after a couple of years and some success to a league title. So you can't not be happy with that level of business, financially at least. Where we get frustrated, I think, and I say we as in, the community, is that we go, okay, Engels away, who's replacing him? Because there's no one like him in the squad. And that's where it comes down to that strategy we keep talking about. But again, it's they have done some good work eventually in this transfer window. So I've got a bit more faith that it will continue. I really hope it does. Apparently there's a new recruitment team in place and a new recruitment structure, although they're keeping it secret by all accounts. But listen, if it's working, it's working. And if it gets to the point where, we get through the Champions League qualifier, we've got the players we want in these positions, I think we can go, okay, fair play, that was good work. Let's see how we move forward for this. And sort of build those bridges again. Because you're right, Paul, there is always that feeling of, it was like Ange Postecoglou when he first came in. That was off the COVID season, and everyone was kind of despondent and fed up and angry. But Ange came in and just, our transfers day one, football was incredible, started winning. Then that anger sort of subsides because it's replaced by the jubilance of watching your team and watching the good football. Although those issues still continue in the background. So hopefully, we all get galvanised and get the right results in the park, although there's still issues in the background, but hopefully that'll fade away as time goes on.
You've mentioned transfer windows under Ange. If we go back to his first season, We know that the first transfer window was, in terms of the CEO, was under Don Mackay. The second January transfer window, of course, was under Michael Nicholson. And I go back to the point I made, when you let the football people do the decisions in terms of the football, obviously budgets have to be looked at, but do not get overly involved in the signing of players. And what I mean by that is that there were players that came to the football club last season that the manager didn't want. That's the most obvious thing. Don't buy a footballer the manager doesn't want, because what will happen is, when it comes to the European registration, he simply won't register them. This is what happened last season with Brendan. And I'm thinking Yamada being an obvious example, but in his first period in charge, there were players like this as well. You know, we signed a guy called Marvin Comper, who's become something of a joke figure in the past. And basically, it was a German internationalist who came to Celtic for £1 million, apparently. And the gaffer didn't want him. So don't allow the money people to make that type of football decision, because it won't work. And I think when you look at that first Michael Nicholson transfer window being the January under Ange Postecoglou, who did we buy? We bought Matt O'Reilly, Dyson Maeda, Rio Atati, and Yusuke Ideguchi, right? So 3 out of 4 ain't bad. What a transfer window that was. And we'd done the business early. I think we announced them like 3 days before the window opened, the 3 Japanese boys. So, you know, when you stay in your lane, when it comes to football and transfers and recruitment, you stay in your lane, it works so much better. But going back to the recruitment side of things, again, doing quite a bit of digging on that. We spoke about this weeks and months ago, that Mark Cooper was more or less the head of recruitment and scouting. And obviously it was his decision or his recommendation that brought James Bell-Walker to the football club in any case. So obviously that they've played a massive part. I think Martin O'Neill's name checked him a few times as well. So yes, if he is announced as departing Celtic, I think it's a big loss at this time of the season as well. But it has to happen at some point, Alan. And I mean, it's great with hindsight if it doesn't go the way we want it to go in the Champions League qualifiers. Oh, we should have kept Engels. I mean, where are you on that one? Because we have said that before with Nicholas Kuhn. I mean, we kept a player in Adamida against his wishes. He wanted to go to Swansea. He played the 2 games against Kairat and he was rotten. Same with Dyson Maeda. You know, we kept on a hold of Dyson Maeda. Should have gone to Wolfsburg. Didn't play well. Missed a 1-on-1 against Kairat. So I'm of the view that I'm quite comfortable if he goes this week.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were wondering if Alistair Johnson and Arne Engels would be available for the qualifier, and neither of them will be at this rate. So for me, I agree with you. I mean, you only have to go back to remembering Edouard and Ryan Christie's performances when they were on the verge of leaving. You know, it wasn't the best, and when a player's angling for a move, obviously, you know, they're not really going to be thinking about maybe busting their knee or whatever to scupper that. So I think it's better not to have unhappy, unsettled players for sure. But what you do need to have is obviously the replacements in. That's the thing. And I think that the timing element is one where I'm not sure that the club have got that bit right yet in terms of timing these deals to replace players in a way that means that it's kind of seamless. You know, we always remember Alistair Johnson being lined up. It was actually before the World Cup in Qatar. People think it was, you know, we bought him because of the World Cup. He was actually lined up before the World Cup to replace Juranovic. You know, and that's the kind of thing that we want to see, really. That is good resource management, good squad management, etc. So that's really what we're looking for. Now, it does appear we have been looking at midfielders extensively, as I mentioned earlier. So it may well be that something can be done quickly on the back of Engels actually moving. Although, again, I don't necessarily understand why it has to be so linear. I think it could be a little bit more overlapped, I would say. But listen, we're not inside these deals, and they are difficult and complex these days, and especially, as I say, when you're trying to get good players.
Well, that came out after the Sarachi deal. We were all frustrated. Why not just buy him? It's cheap, it's cheerful. We know what he can do. Then after the event, you realise it's complicated.
It's complicated. There's co-ownership. There's part ownership. There's, you know, some of these South American ownerships arrangements are quite complex. Let's just leave it at that. Quite complicated.
Yeah. I just can't keep my eyes off your monkey there, Alan, and that's not a euphemism. Right, there's
again, don't clip that. Do not clip that, please.
Listen, if only you were the first person to say that.
The best clip this week was Johnny Hughes on Wednesday. I've seen it popping up all over the socials. It's going to be a go-to clip every time.
Don't be laughing at my monkey. There's way better things in Scottish football at the moment to be laughing at.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Keeping Stu.
Yeah, I know. Listen, lots to talk about, but what I want to do, I'm going to take a little sidestep. We're not going to talk about music, indie music. We're going to talk about football and something that we are involved in at this moment in time. A wee update on it as well. We will assist anyone we possibly can in any way we possibly can. And now and again, we will ask for assistance. And we did that a few years ago, you'll remember, with the St. Mary's fundraiser, where St. Mary's were in dire straits financially. I learned the politics of all that for the first time ever, having been brought up a Catholic. I didn't know that if you were in debt to the Vatican, basically, you had to just pay it back. And so they found themselves in a situation, St. Mary's, where they were about 14 grand down. And they had a system that wasn't working, a heating system, and they had some repairs to the roof that they needed done. We had a wee meeting with them. We put it out there to Celtic fans, and Celtic fans didn't raise 14 grand. They raised 30 odd grand and got the whole thing sorted. The birthplace of Celtic. Unbelievable. So as well as people come to us, we will come to you. That's my point. We do ask from time to time for a wee bit of assistance. And recently we have been asking for assistance around a George Conley documentary. Now, I just want to lay this out. I have got absolutely 100%. I've got an interest in this, and I have done, because George Conley, even back in the 1950s, was a family friend coming from the same village. My great aunt walked him to his first day at primary school at St. Serphs in High Valleyfield. My dad worked with his big brother Josie, who actually was a striker, believe it or not, guys, with Cowdenbeath. Josie Conley, right? And Joe Conley played with Cowdenbeath the night that Celtic played Cowdenbeath in a friendly to unveil the floodlights at Central Park in 1968. Yeah, Joe Conley playing for Cowdenbeath, George Conley playing for Celtic, of course. So you're grown up with a myth that is George Conley. And then when I was a young guy playing football for Valleyfield, my coach was Mick Hutton, George's best mate. So he's been omnipresent through my Celtic supporting life. So 7 years ago, when Jed Fitzsimmons approached myself for a discussion around this documentary, I was always going to help. What we've done recently is we have set up a crowdfunder, and I want to just give you an update on this, because it's pretty humbling to see the development just even in the last 24 hours with this. Now there's 9 days to go. What we've asked for to make this film happen, and it's a cinematic, full feature-length documentary, is £50,000, right? It's a lot of money in everybody's book, of course it is. But look at how much we've raised with 9 days to go. £48,235, 96% of the total. We are hurtling towards meeting our target, which means that the film is made in the vision of the director, Jed Fitzsimmons. Big Celtic fan. There's pictures of me and Jed at Celtic games about 7 years ago together, where we were talking about this. And here it is, coming to fruition, thanks to Celtic supporters, thanks to ACSOM listeners, ACSOM viewers. Can we get it up to 50 grand by the weekend? Maybe we can. We've got a couple of £1,000 to go. Again, lots of money, but we do have a lot of viewers. Right now, we've got 2,700 live watching ACSOM. The link to the crowdfunder is underneath this video. And all I can say is, yeah, we're out with the begging bowls. We're out with the bonnets. We're asking for money right now for this movie. But in the future, we will be returning that in kind. We will assist with fundraisers. We do as much as we possibly can. So thanks, everybody, for helping us to get to this point. And when I woke up this morning and checked the total, as I have been doing every single day for the last 2 months or so, I couldn't believe the total, 48,000. It's jumped up overnight by over 5 grand. And I think that if we get to the 50, it's just going to be an absolutely incredible achievement. Thank you, everybody, for having a Celtic state of mind, basically, you know, because we ask for assistance and we get it. It is phenomenal. Thank you all for it. Links underneath the video. George Conley, slightly before your time, Alan, but you'll be one of these guys who'll be well aware of him. I'd love you at some point to have a look at him. I know you do retrospective things. I'd love you to come back to us and say, you know what, in terms of a midfielder, George Conley was similar to this guy. He was always compared to Franz Beckenbauer.
Yeah, no, he's because he was in the team at the same time as Dalglish, who was my childhood hero. So, but not somebody I knew a lot about as a child. It was more Dalglish I was fixated on. But yeah, I mean the stories about him, and I love going back reading all the old stories about all the old players. Just and he's just one of these players that you almost defies description. I'd love to watch him to work out what actually was he, because it sounds like you said the comparisons to Beckenbauer, a player that could walk through the midfield, could score goals, was a great defender, could almost play anywhere across the front, through the middle spine of the team. I mean, it's just a bit like the legendary Manchester United player Duncan Edwards, who sadly died in the Munich air disaster. He was only about 18, 19 years old, but the contemporary reports about him was that he was just there's nothing he couldn't do on a football pitch, and he played predominantly I think in a sort of what we'd call a holding midfield position now, but probably was a bit different in those days. And George Connolly reminds me a little bit of that style of a player that almost defied categorization. And I'd love, so to your point, if there's video available, I'd love to do a stat grab and work out what sort of player he was.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you're talking about video available. This is I've been involved in a few documentaries in the years, but mainly 2. And the big thing is trying to get that archive. In fact, 3. One of them was never released. The Quality Street Gang, featuring George Connolly, was never released. But you find archive footage from time to time, and I think one of the biggest selling points of this film is that Jed Fitzsimmons has unearthed an incredible unseen archive of Celtic footage. So you will be seeing a lot of that for time to come. There's an interview with Jim Craig, which is in the trailer, where he says there's not been a football position developed that this kid can't play. He could play anywhere on the park. So absolutely delighted with that. Thanks, everybody. Absolutely humbled by the response. And let's hope in the next 9 days we can get it to the 50 and we know the film's going to be made. Then you'll be able to go out there and see the theatrical release of this movie and everything. It's going to be incredible. Tony Cassidy, always great to see you in the chat. Motherwell versus Freiburg, Hibs versus Ghent. So you've been keeping an eye on the draw. Who did Rangers get? Let us know, Tony, in the chat as well. Brown Warrior comes in to say Engels is ideal for the English game. I think he is. I think he'll do really, really well. And I agree with Alan. I think they'll get promoted and he'll prove himself. And there'll be another move, a big money move that we'll see Engels get. Dennis Jameson is the boy from Chelsea. Is that one not happening now? I don't know if it's not happening. He's been up at Lennox Town checking the place out, 18-year-old left back, but there is interest from other clubs. Emmanuel. So I think that what happens there is it just shows just how good he is, but we can't keep running with one left back. I mean, that is just a big concern. I'm going to touch on the game tomorrow for a wee bit here, Brian. Tell me your thoughts, because since Tannadie's 2-0 defeat, Celtic have won every domestic game. Quite an incredible start. It took us to the double. It started us off well this season as well. But we return to Tannadice. It's going to be a tough game, of course, but how do we line up in terms of shape and personnel?
So it's interesting to see, Martin's been alluding to playing Duran and who up front as a pair, but I don't know if we've quite got the bodies for a 3-5-2, so he may go 4-4-2. But you think you can't really drop Negan from that, because I think he actually links up really well with what we've seen so far. So he may try for the 3-5-2. It'd be interesting to see, or he may just maybe play Hassan wide left, Duran right, who in the middle, with Negan behind him, and stick to the if Engels isn't to be Engels and Callum McGregor. It's quite hard to tell just now what they're thinking, because I'm never, when it's the sort of fullback positions, I'm wondering who we've got on the right side can really do the fullback at the moment. I'm not sure if that's Hassan's bag, so it'll be interesting to see. But what's exciting is, and it sounds like one of those things that's like, why are you getting excited about this? But the fact, Martin, he's actually talking about changing things, being able to change formations and shapes, and people just adapt. How many times last season, the season before, did we say, why can't we just change to a 4-4-2 for this game, or why can't we just change the 3 back, or why can't we go, whatever up front? All seemed this weird, and well, that's the system the players are trained in, and I never bought that as an excuse. I always thought that was strange. So I like the fact that Martin's talking about changing things up a bit, and it'd be really interesting to see how we do, and how we do shape up. And I would like to see the two strikers up front, because I think Duran looks like a striker playing out wide. You know, you saw the other day he was desperate to cut in and shoot with his left, and it does look to have quality. So hopefully we'll see that. And Tannadice is a hard place to go. As you know, obviously last time, as you said, Paul, we get beat, but it's been interesting with Dundee United so far this season, because they've actually played quite well despite no winning, which I know sounds sort of bad, but they play decent stuff. So I do think it's not going to be quite a stroll. However, I would say I think we're much more organised. We look physically a bit more up for it. And if we play the way we did against Kilmarnock, I think there'll be very few teams in Scotland can cope with us, because that was the best we played for a while. And it's certainly since Martin and Sean Maloney have been in charge. So if we can keep that up and keep that, you know, that pace of the game and that directness, then I think we'll be fine. But I'm really interested to see, because the Dundee game at home, I didn't think we were up to much, if I'm honest. Kilmarnock game, I thought was the best we've played since Martin came back. So really interested to see how we do this time. And if we can keep up that momentum, then it's going to be an exciting season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions actually about how this is going to go, Alan. As Brian has alluded to there, Martin O'Neill has spoken just yesterday, he spoke about the tweaks. And I think last season it was understandable because there was so little wiggle room. If you then make a change and it doesn't work out, you're blown the title, basically. That's the way it was going to be last season. There's going to be an opportunity at some point in the season, I don't know if it's this weekend, where he's able to change the shape of the team. But there's a few pointers actually that might shove him into that position this weekend. In actual fact, obviously the loss of Alistair Johnston. Are you then looking at Colby Donovan to come in as your right back? You know that Kieran Tierney could push up and play that wide left position in the mid and be that overlapping fullback. Scales is back from suspension. Does he form part of a back three? Duran's not looked comfortable on the right hand side. Does he form part of a top two? Does Hassan come back and come straight into the team? I mean, does Bauer play a part? How do you think we're going to play it this weekend? Is it going to be more of the same, playing it safe, Alan? Or are we going to take a few risks with the starting 11?
Well, it would be very risky, I think, to make dramatic changes to how the team's set up and how it plays one game before a Champions League qualifier. So that sounds unlikely to me that we'll dramatically see a change in shape and approach. I'd be very surprised if that happened. Now, that said, as you pointed out, some changes will be required. So if Engels is done today, and certainly it sounds like it'll be done before the European deadline, then the one player that might get dropped in is Bauer. Obviously, he's a central midfielder, and as he said in his interview yesterday, he's ready to go. So he may be the one that gets dropped in. I don't think we'll see any great change in shape. What we saw against Kilmarnock in terms of adapting from the Dundee game was just a little bit more flexibility in how the forward players moved around. There was a lot more. Duran was less playing as a sort of touchline winger, more playing as a floaty inside forward, and Yang similarly. And I think that worked really well. Now, listen, the Kilmarnock game, one of the many reasons that people don't like watching Huddle Breakdown is we do spend a lot of time talking about the opposition, because guess what? The opponent has agency in matches against Celtic, and it matters. And actually, the Dundee and Kilmarnock games were excellent case studies in two sides on the face of it playing a high pressing strategy, very similar, but executing it very differently. I.e., Dundee did it well for 60 minutes and then got very tired, and Kilmarnock were absolutely awful at it and had three forwards who couldn't press, more or less. And we just played through it with ease. So we're not going to come up against a team that allows us to play so freely as Kilmarnock did. And Dundee United's going to be a very different proposition, a lot more direct, a lot more compact, a lot more emphasis on set pieces, etc. A bit more the traditional style of opponent that Celtic come up against in Scotland. So that's a tricky game. So for that reason, and because of the last games coming up, I'd be very, very surprised if we change anything too radical. The biggest area of contention, I think, for me, will be who drops into that central midfield slot alongside Callum McGregor, and I think it would probably be the new lad Bauer, because I don't think either Oxlade-Chamberlain or McCowan give you the energy grass coverage and defensive solidity that you need in that position. And you're going to need it Tannadice as well. You're going to need physical units to go up against them even.
Yeah, you're talking there also about the registration, the deadline. We're playing on the 19th. The deadline is 5 days before. So it is today. I'd need to check what time that is. Is it's close of play tonight, maybe? And then you've got the opportunity to have 2 wild cards between now and the evening before the game to drop them into your squad as well. So we shall see how many more come in and how many leave. The Johnston injury obviously has put paid to any move to Everton. Really disappointed in that, because when you think about this as well, Brian, the massive upturn in Celtic's performances at the end of last season, yes, was due to the fact that Martin O'Neill was able to instill this incredible mentality into the team. And yes, it was massively down to Dyson Maeda's performances, but also the return of Alistair Johnston and Arnie Engels, 2 guys that after today we might be missing for the European Games.
Oh, absolutely, and he's a huge player for us. You can see, I mean, even when he pulled out the other day, you can see there's a massive drop off. I mean, particularly for him and Ralston, but I think Donovan's a bit closer. The drop off's not quite as extreme, but even there, he's a quality footballer, Johnson, and he's going to be a massive loss. And you actually can't even imagine if we did change to say a 3-5-2, he'd be quite good slotting at the right centre back as well as the wing back, because you've got that physicality, that strength. So yeah, massive blow, and it's one of those players, you know, if he'd have went to Everton, I think people would have wished him the best, but obviously you're glad to keep him. You don't want to keep an unhappy player, but it doesn't seem that type of guy, so we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, any player that has quality is a massive loss for us, which again goes back to the early point about, yeah, it's great to keep getting quality over quantity, but we do still need people to cover positions. Again, as mentioned earlier, particularly midfield, centre half as well, maybe. As much as I like big money coming in, it's nice to see one of the academy boys get a chance. CCV gets injured again, then we're tight with just him trusting Scales at the back. So slightly concerning there as well. But yeah, to Alistair Johnson point, massive loss for us, and hope he's not out for too long.
No, without a doubt. I'm going to give you the 2 ends of the scale when it comes to opinion on a Celtic State of Mind. We've got 2,000, just under 3,000 actually watching live here. And, we've got David coming in saying Nicholson deserves credit. And straight off the back, we have in the heat saying the board are still sitting with £120 million in the bank, and we've got 1 left back. So there's the 2 ends of the scale, and you can discuss that in the comments section as to where you are.
Both things can be true, right? That's the beauty of things. You know, both things can be true. You can give credit where it's due, but also you point out the absolute failings at times. So I think both opinions you can go, okay, fair enough. That's credit where it's due for getting these in. But yes, we've got 1 left back, and as I just alluded to, only 4 centre halves. So there are still problems to fix.
I want to get the gif of Roy Keane saying he's just doing his job and play it every time that comment comes up. However, that's maybe a little bit harsh. We've got Stevie B coming in, liked the Bauer 24 reference. Yeah, it was good. It was excellent. And we do have some song suggestions as well. The Bauer of Love, says Kieran. Of course, it's got to be that. The Middlesbrough, Rob Lilly says, the Middlesbrough game was a big part of the wake-up, in my opinion. Well, let me have a look at the timeline. So I was having a look at this morning. When did Celtic play Shelbourne? Celtic played Shelbourne on the 7th of July. And we signed our first player of the pre-season on the 10th of July, Camilo Duran. So on the 7th of July, when we had that impromptu get-together between Michael Nicholson, Brian Wilson, Martin O'Neill and the AICSC at their AGM, where they more or less hijacked it, we hadn't signed anybody. And some of the answers that then filtered into the Celtic sphere were rather concerning around how difficult it was to sign players. It's my understanding that went down like a lead balloon, and not just amongst the Celtic fans, but within the club. And since then, you've seen slightly different approach when it comes to signing players. And I do think that's what's rattled the cage. I think that was the final straw. And fair play to the ICSC, because they got a lot. And by the way, it's not an artificial intelligence Celtic Supporters Club. It is the Association of Ireland Celtic Supporters Clubs. They got a lot of stick, I thought, unfairly at the time, because they were hijacked by the Celtic party at that point. But what has come from that, I think, is good, because they were, shone a light on someone coming up with a lot of excuses that nobody was buying, the Celtic fans were really frustrated, but so were people within the football club. And I think that has sparked the change. Alan, does that make sense? Am I looking too much into that? Is that a conspiracy theory?
I'm sceptical, I'll be honest with you. I think this pre-season was always going to be difficult for all clubs because of the World Cup, the delay in players coming back, the knock-on effect that had on player availability. I mean, when Celtic played against AC Milan, they didn't have any of their World Cup players playing. They had a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds. So, what do you learn from that? And that was just a case of Celtic had to provide matches to their squad on these dates because the season had started here, and AC Milan are working to this date because their season started here. So, I don't think it's reading way too much into it. And by the way, so there's a really good piece today on Celtic Way interview with Hasim Hassan, Celtic's new winger, right? And what he is saying is that Celtic, he was talking to Celtic before the World Cup, well before the World Cup, right? And actually, it was because Celtic made clear what the project was, what his role in it was, what Martin O'Neill told him about getting into the Champions League, etc. And the fact that Celtic maintained contact, maintained their interest all the way through the World Cup, all the way through since the World Cup. And given after that World Cup, interest in that lad absolutely mushroomed, he actually, and this reflects well on him as an individual, I think, he was convinced and was impressed with the fact that Celtic would put in this amount of work over a number of months to sign him. So the reason I'm telling you all this is that the gestation period for a transfer deal isn't just, oh, we lost a game of football, let's get on the phone. It can be that, but I suspect you will often repent at leisure. But if you've got a footballer that is well scouted, well understood, it can sometimes take months for this to come to fruition because of things like summer breaks, end of the season, his team were fighting relegation, a World Cup, all those sort of things come into play. And that seems to be the case in this. So are we saying because we didn't play well against Middlesbrough, we suddenly bought Hassan? Well, that's not the case. That simply isn't true. This is a deal that's been months in the making, and Celtic have finally got it over the line. Now, again, we can still criticise Celtic, because as Brian rightly says, many things can be true at the same time. We can still posit that they take too long. We can still posit they don't move quick enough. We can still posit they don't get the deals done at a time that is optimal for qualifying for the Champions League. All those things can be true. But on the other hand, what can also be true is that we show patience and resilience to get a top-rated target over the line despite months of waiting and months of distraction as his reputation blossoms in front of our eyes.
Martin O'Neill actually said he was one we've been tracking since January, Alan. And the point you make there about the player and giving the player credit, I think it's a good one as well, because these guys can be deemed mercenaries from time to time. Their head can be turned by going elsewhere. I think Marseille were part of the conversation as well when it came to Hassan. There are a number of issues.
Given his age, he could easily. One of the things that's impressive about him is he got promotion with Real Oviedo, which is a big deal for that club. It's a small Spanish team. I don't think they've been in La Liga for a long time, and they were always going to struggle, right? They didn't have the resources to throw loads of money at it, and he stayed for the full year. He hardly got the ball. He hardly saw the ball. He hardly got to do anything. But he stayed with them, and they got relegated to finish bottom. But he stuck with them. He got them promoted, and he stuck with them. So I like that. I like that side of it. That he obviously got a bit of loyalty there. He probably could have left on the back of a successful promotion campaign. I'm sure his stock was probably high at that point. I'm not pretending that I knew anything about him at that time. I didn't, but I imagine it probably was. So I think those two factors are encouraging, I would say. But we don't know. We don't know the guy. We don't know his character. But I think that's an encouraging sign.
Without a doubt. And again, who isn't a new name in terms of being linked to Celtic as well? We spoke about him in January. So yes, there is that patience of getting the deal over the line. I think in terms of the relationship between, I got a really genuinely good message last night on YouTube about this. The relationship between the Celtic fan base and the board. I think there's a way to go. But when these moves are getting made, that absolutely builds towards more of a unity, right? When these moves are getting made. Yes, we've ran for far too long without replacements in key areas. And as the commenter says, we still are in some areas. The left-back position is a worry to me. However, the more positive moves that we make as a football club, the closer to unity we become. I've been saying all week, you know, a lot of it is quite simple, Brian, when it comes to supporting a football team. You just want the people that make the decisions to be as, I think, obsessed with the football club's success as we are. Do as much as you possibly can. There's only so much a fan can do. We can invest in the football club. We can push for change. But the decision makers ultimately are the ones with all of that in their control. And I think that when you're looking at the way we've done business since that Shelbourne game, since Duran comes in, and then we're looking at Hu, and we're looking at Bauer, and we're looking at Hassan and saying, well, each of those four players are absolutely the profile of player we have been banging on about for a long time on ACSOM, and I'm sure Celtic fans have been doing elsewhere. I want to come back to Alan before we wrap up, actually, to give me your thoughts on Hassan, because I was talking yesterday with JP about how we bring in a player like Nicholas Kuhn, who goes on to be a real hero at Celtic, and he leaves the football club and he's very productive in terms of goals and assists. But had you looked at his performance for 2 or 3 seasons before he came to Celtic, just on the base level of goals and assists, Alan, you might have thought, not quite sure about him. Hassan's the same, but he has been playing for a team that's been struggling. He's not been playing on the front foot as an attacking force. Could you give us a little bit more of an insight into what we should expect from Hassan?
So, firstly, what I'm about to say isn't my work. So, recommend, if you like.
I'm more of a magpie, Alan. I just claim it as my own, so fair play.
Absolutely. So, if you like contextualized views on players, please come over to Huddle Breakdown. My friend and colleague James does benchmarking exercises which don't just regurgitate a load of numbers on a player. They really are all about putting the context of the team he plays for, the style of play of the team, how he's being utilised, what those numbers therefore mean in that context, and then projecting forward to say, well, how does that scale, or how does that adjust when playing for a team like Celtic? So if you like your kind of scouting reports to reflect those kinds of aspects, then those benchmarking reports are for you, and James does them for any of the players that Celtic sign, and sometimes for opposition players in the league as well. So this is a super exciting signing, and it will be frustrating, as wingers always are potentially, but it could also be very, very exciting. I mean, yes, I share a concern that the sheer productivity numbers, goals and assists, are very low on the face of it. Certainly, sort of almost Tunetki vibes in that sense. But in terms of dribbling with the ball, carrying the ball up the pitch, sheer elite level pace, this guy, if you just look at the metrics concerned with ball carrying and dribbling, so I'm not talking about anything else. I'm not talking about passing. I'm not talking about shooting. I'm not talking about crossing. I'm not talking about overall sort of creative type metrics. Then this guy is in the same neighborhood for these specific attributes as your, Lamine Yamal, your Vinicius Juniors, your Nico Williams in La Liga. That's where he was. He was an extreme outlier at an elite level in carrying the ball forward at pace and dribbling. Now, what he doesn't have, or he'd be at Barcelona, Madrid, etc., is then that that top end evidence of, can he score goals off of it? Can he create loads of chances off of it? His crossing metrics are very good. And what I really like about him is he does seem to be quite two-footed, which I adore. To me, all professional footballers should be two-footed to some degree, certainly to a much greater degree than they actually are. He can go both ways. So if you think about Nicholas Kuhn, terrific pace, great transition, threat, but he knew exactly what he was going to do. He was always going to cut inside, and he was always going to try and get a shot away. Very little variety. Or the second option was he would cut inside, and then Alistair Johnson would overlap, and the ball would go, and we'd cut up teams open that way. It was very effective. You knew what he was going to do. Many teams in Scotland couldn't stop him. This guy has a bit more to him than that, he's a bit more. His underlying numbers. So we talk about goals and assists, but your expected goals, expected assists, I think, tell you more about the quality of the chances being created, because it's not Hassan's fault if nobody finishes the chances that he creates. So his expected assist numbers are better than his assist numbers. And his crossing success rate is actually pretty decent. So again, he's not. If he was at the same levels as he was at dribbling, then, as I say, he wouldn't be at Celtic. He'd be at an elite club. But we've seen with players like Frimpong that when you have somebody who has a very small set of attributes that are at the elite level, you can get a very lucrative career out of that. And I think he's a similar type of player in the sense that he's going to have that high end, pace and dribbling ability. It's going to be super interesting to see how he plays in Europe in transition. So when Celtic playing on the break against better European sides, I think he'll be a massive asset. Not only will he just get the ball up the field, which is an undervalued skill, just relieving pressure on a defence being battered if we're away at Manchester City or Real Madrid or something like that. But also, actually a threat in behind. And if he can form connections with Kasper, who we've seen his movement is world class, I would say, then we could be in for exciting times. So very, very excited. Obviously not perfect. Has some genuinely elite level attributes.
No, I mean, I think what it says to me, Alan, is that with regards to that particular position, that position's been a troublesome one to actually replace Jota with when he left, and I don't think we ever have. And we're in that situation with Jota where we simply don't know what we're getting back and when it's going to happen. A hero who can, again, two-footed, a hero to the Celtic fans, but we don't know what we're getting. And what we need to do in the meantime is be, I think, very cute in respect to who we bring in. Bringing in a lone player was not going to fly until Jota got fit. Running with Trinecti was not going to fly until Jota got fit. There was talk yesterday, I've not seen it confirmed, that Balikwisha might be on his way to the MLS. Yeah, we know that Jan can play there. We know that even James A. Forrest can play there, but we needed somebody, Brian, didn't we, that you could hang your hat on and say, he's the first pick. If Jota comes back, and Jota's the Jota of old, what a great situation to be in, but he's the first pick. And from what Alan said there, it sounds as though that's exactly what's going to happen when he's finally introduced to the starting 11. Yeah,
I hope so. And as I said earlier, I think he's a player I'm very, very excited about. I saw him in the World Cup, particularly against Argentina. He was absolutely excellent. That real direct winger. I think Martin O'Neill said this as well. Just taking people on, dribbling past them is something that weirdly we've not had wingers doing for a while. So really exciting. And if you look at the movement, and I think when Duran plays up front as well, as well as Kasper's movement, which is excellent, and his physicality, Duran's pace there and ability in the box as well would really benefit from that. Because even players with that sort of, and we saw it with Maeda, they've got that elite level physicality and pace, they can still drag defenders out and sort of indirectly almost help strikers. So I'm really excited about him. I think it's going to be a really good signing. But then that also makes me go back to, I wonder what system we're going to play, because I don't think he's going to be a wing back. I wouldn't have imagined.
No.
So
he's not got. Sorry, Brian. He's not got a lot of defending in him. And so
that's why I was thinking you're going to have to. So you're probably going to have Kieran Tierney if you're playing him, and then have him as more attack. So it'll be interesting to see how that shapes up if they do, or if they go with the 4-4-2, which again kind of puzzles me with how the midfield sounds out. So it's exciting though, to be fair, and it's exciting to be excited for the first time for a while about transfers. So yeah, so far positive, but work to be done.
It's far more enjoyable, Brian, to discuss things like transfers of players coming in of a decent calibre. Absolutely it is. And it's definitely broken up this week, I can say that for sure. Almost 3,000 watching live just now. And before we wrap up, I'm going to say a thank you, because even whilst we've been on, the George Conley fundraiser for his movie is risen to 48,400. We've got £1,600 to go. We've got 9 days to do it. We are going to get there. There is going to be an incredible film for us all to be proud of. Cannot wait for that day to come. So thank you, everybody, for getting involved. Thank you to Alan Morrison and his monkey. Thank you to Brian Degnan, all the way from Swindon. And if you want to support the channel, give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to us on YouTube, and join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.